While I was reflecting on legacy, it led me to remember a book that I read a couple of years ago. How many of you remember Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? I see a couple of hands. Some of you might have read it. Some of you might have survived a workplace training built around it. Nearly 20 years ago, when I first encountered that book, there was an exercise, Habit 2, begin with the end in mind, that completely reframed how I understood legacy. It shifted my idea of legacy from just money or property that you leave in a will into something much deeper, the long-lasting impact of life and your choices. Covey invites the reader to imagine attending your own funeral. I know it's grim, but stay with me. So in that imagining, he invites us to sit down and picture opening the program and noticing 4 speakers. 1, a family member, someone from your web of kinfolks, a close friend, someone from your workplace or profession, and someone from your faith community or volunteer where you've given your time. But then comes the real invitation. What would you like each of these people or representatives to say? What kind of partner or friend would you want their words to reflect? What kind of character would you want them to have seen you in? Covey says, look carefully at the people who you've gathered in your mind's eye and ask, what difference would you have wanted to have made in their lives? Maybe some of you have already wrestled with those questions, but when I read that exercise at the tender age of 25, it shook me. Because if I was honest, my answers back then weren't matching my actual life. At the time, my legacy was mostly the military. I'd unfortunately fallen out of touch with most of my family. I'd been traveling too much with work and deployments to grow relationships or friendships outside of the uniform. Many people I did serve with didn't really know me, not honestly because of don't ask, don't tell, and I was afraid if I start talking, maybe they might know. And I wasn't rooted in any church. I did some volunteering, but never in a sustained way. Traveling made that impossible. And I'm not sharing this to make my story the main story. I'm sharing it because I suspect that maybe someone here or maybe someone watching at home might recognize the feeling, an uneasy feeling that maybe your life is worth more than how you're living it. I know I had that tug. Is this really the story I want to be told about my life? Is this the only story that I want to be told about my life? Maybe some of you are wondering where your gifts belong. Maybe you're searching for a community where your story matters. Maybe it hasn't occurred to you yet that you already carry a legacy worth tending. This past Veterans Day, as I reflected on my call to ministry, which came when I was stationed in Korea, I found myself marveling that nearly 20 years later, I am finally living a life I once barely could imagine. One where I am known, seen, held in community, not hiding, but truly contributing. And I had to embrace a certain spiritual truth in order for me to get here. I had to realize, and I just was really reckoning with this when I was at the mountain at this retreat center. I had to embrace that I couldn't keep living out yesterday's version of myself and still grow into tomorrow's calling. So last week, I had the privilege of attending the Southeast UU Ministers Association retreat at the Mountain Learning Center in North Carolina. And as I reconnected with colleagues and heard how folks were describing this congregation, that was a part of the inspiration for me to want to shed a layer that I was bringing in so that I could grow into all that people were telling me about this community. It was all good things, I assure you, I assure you. They spoke of our beautiful facilities with our all-gender restrooms. They talked about our music and our intentional movement practices and ministries like Soul Summit that's happening in March that ripples beyond these walls. But as I was preparing for this service on Legacy, I noticed that there was a theme in their reflections. They kept referring to us as the big church. And I know that we are the largest congregation, the largest UU congregation in the Atlanta region, but I couldn't help wondering, what does it really mean to be the big church? I mean, it sounds flattering, and in many ways it is. It acknowledges our generations of dedication and vision and service. But sometimes it can feel like trying to wear a jacket that doesn't quite fit anymore. It could feel like maybe wearing a jacket that you inherited, meaningful and beautiful, but tailored slightly for a different era. I believe that sometimes we hold on to the memory of how things used to fit, how full maybe the sanctuary used to be, what ministry used to look like rather than honoring who we are becoming now. In the poem that we read earlier, William E. Lee describes this city as ever-changing and yet still the same, forgetting not from whence she came. This is legacy, change, but with remembrance, growth, with our feet planted in deep roots. And UUCA, like me, has some deep roots. Many of you know the history that I only recently have been reading in pages compiled by our unofficial historian, Jim Kelly, as well as some books that people have been so generous to give me. In my readings, I found that from our role in the civil rights movement to our ministries of music, care, and justice, we have inherited a profound lineage. Long before we were known as the big church, Unitarians and Universalists were trying wild, courageous things in this city. Right after the Civil War, two ministers, George Leonard Chaney and Quillen Hamilton Shin, came to Atlanta to plant a liberal religion in a place that was neither common nor welcome. From the very beginning, our legacy has carried courage. Then later in the 1950s, when this congregation reformed after dissolution, our predecessors made a bold decision to become Atlanta's first intentionally racially integrated church. Did y'all know that? Yeah. It had to come as an intention, and that is our DNA, that is our lineage. We have been built, rebuilt, shaped, and transformed each time by people willing to plant something that they might never live to see fully grown. Just like Talia's planting the almond tree in today's Time for All Ages story, just like Chaney and Shin laying a spiritual foundation in a city that was not yet ready for it, just like the families who insisted that a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Atlanta must be integrated even when the city council opposed it. It's just like the generations who built the Cliff Valley Ways Circle Sanctuary, which I heard is an architectural sermon on shared truth and shared power. A sanctuary as an architectural sermon. That is powerful. And also the members who endured the 4 years of nomadic church before arriving to this new home less than 3 years ago. It is all of you that we come from, people who meet the moment with courage and creativity. There's this podcast that I love. Y'all know I like podcasts. I'm always talking about them. And this one, Our Ancestors Were Messy. It's so funny. In this podcast, it tells stories left out of history books, stories that add texture and truth to legacies of great leaders who were both luminous and flawed. And I bring this up because truly that's what legacy really is. It's a full mixture of our sweetness and our struggles, our whole lives with its good and possibly not so good stories. And I think that we know that well here in Atlanta. I mean, for folks who studied history, the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose words grace our social hall, reminds us that love and justice, if you really get to know the people, sometimes it's not quite as tidy as some history makes it seem. We're not going to get all into that, but we know that here at UUCA, we inherit a legacy that's like that too. Not perfect, but powerful. Our history shows a pattern that when the world shifts, UUCA listens, adjusts, and rises again. We sang earlier, we are building a new way. We are building a new way. Yes. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. The part that I want to focus on about that song, there's a line that says, we can feed our every need, start with love that is the seed. I bring that up because I was raised believing that all you need is a mustard seed size of faith. I used to carry a little mustard seed in my wallet so I could know, tiny, tiny little thing, but that's all you need of faith. And I say the same thing about love. And I want to acknowledge that if you're staring at a mountain of anxiety, that tiny seed can have a hard time taking root. And I bring that up because in any season of transition, there can be some tension between what was, what is, and what could be. Those gaps can feel like open space for anxiety to creep in if faith doesn't fill the cup first. I don't know about you, but I know I've had many seasons when my mountains felt taller than my faith felt strong. Sometimes we can't do anything about the mountain itself, the uncertainties, the fear of what's coming next, but we can change what we do with it. That's where today's offertory song, Whitney Houston's The Greatest Love of All, points to this greater and deeper lesson. That the greatest gift, the greatest act of faith is believing that we are already enough right now as we are. Our legacy as a congregation isn't just in our origin story, it's also in the everyday living saints whose names some of you speak with tenderness just around here on the day-to-day, like John Bolton, whose bread ministry continues to nourish both the hungry body and spirit. Also like Mary Ann Oakley, whose advocacy for accessibility inspired the elevator that helps us all rise together. Or in a completely different way, I had a conversation with John Lance, who told me about care for end-of-life ministry that made burials and cremation services accessible to all. I hadn't heard of this, and I was so grateful to learn. Each of these kinds of gifts, and I know that there are so many others, each of them offers an ongoing lived sermon about what it means to turn faith into action. I believe that their lives remind us that legacy can be shared and released while we are living here in this plane, on this earth now. So what does it mean for UUCA in this moment to live our gifts forward? It means taking a clear look at our resources, human, financial, and spiritual, and asking, how do we use what we have to grow what matters most? In an article, Meet the Moment, Reverend Ashley Haran, UUA Vice President for Programs and Ministries, says that one of the core principles of Unitarian Universalism has always been this, quote, revelation is not sealed. Our understandings of the divine morality, justice, and community must evolve with the world around us. Haran reminds us that we inherit spiritual gifts, legacy, from our ancestors, but we are responsible for interpreting those gifts through the lens of our needs of our own time. She writes that across time, Unitarian Universalism has offered, quote, clarity and moral courage in direct opposition to violence and fear, and that we are facing another great reckoning now. Many of us know that the world has changed politically, economically, spiritually, and generationally, and some structures that were built for another era are no longer calibrated for this moment. Some ministries, some habits or expectations may no longer match our current reality. And yet, Haran insists, as I hope all of us do, that Unitarian Universalism is still life-giving, life-changing, and life-saving. Do y'all believe that? That regardless of how things change, that Unitarian Universalism is still life-giving, life-changing, and life-saving. Yes, I love that. And knowing that means that there are opportunities before us that are so immense. This means that legacy is not just something we inherit. Legacy is something we practice today, personally, congregationally, in Atlanta, and beyond. So again, what does that look like? Sometimes it means pruning, letting go of programs or expectations that no longer fit our mission. Sometimes it means regrafting, bringing in new voices, new partnerships, new ways of worship and witness that help us bear fruit in these changing seasons. Sometimes it means simply resting. I know I could use some rest sometime. And in that rest, trusting that growth often begins underground, before it breaks the surface, especially as we move deeply into the rest rhythms of fall and winter. And I want to just share a few more practical ways that we can embrace this mindset together. 4 of them. The first, recommit to relationships over reputation and size. I say that because being a big church can tempt us to focus on scale, like how many people shows up, but our real strength lies in our depth. Number 2, invest in formation, not just function. Every ministry, from Sacred Soul senior programs to the Pilgrim Gallery Arts, can become a space for spiritual growth. You're invited to ask yourself, how does this nourish courage, compassion, or curiosity in myself or others? Just from standing and looking at art, from showing up. Number 3, measure success by love's ripple. Instead of only counting attendance, not that anyone here is doing that, but sometimes it can be hard to not look around and note who we think is missing from the circle. But instead, we can start tracking stories of transformation, like how many people felt seen this week? How many acts of justice or kindness flowed from the worship? And the 4th and last one, we keep our table open. We let our welcome be so radical, extending beyond our doors into partnerships and communities across Atlanta. Our history says that we flourish most when we welcome broadly, boldly, and without fear. This is legacy work. Not holding tight to once was as I once did, but not racing anxiously toward what might be, but discerning together what love is asking of us right now. So yes, begin with the end in mind as I did. Imagine the story that will one day be told about your life. Imagine the story that will be told about this congregation, the story that's told about Atlanta and about Unitarian Universalism in Atlanta. And as we prepare to sing, though I may speak with bravest fire, I invite you to let these words guide us. May we be a people who tend a legacy worthy of the ancestors and worthy of generations yet to come. May we keep building not just the big church, but a beloved one. Thank you.